Thank you, Chrissy, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Thanks to the team at Resource Connect Asia for inviting us along. So Stewie and Prue and Jackson, thanks very much. And of course the lead sponsors, Tribeca and Argonaut. So we are going to be talking about vanadium, and we're going to be talking about vanadium for a cleaner future and developing a vanadium project in the middle of Western Australia. When the button works. There we go. So this is available on our website, so I'll let you read that at your leisure. So vanadium is supporting our move to net zero. So vanadium, as one of the speakers in the previous session, Vincent Elgar, talked about, primary use at the moment is in steel, and it has a really big role to play in reducing carbon emissions related to steel applications. But where the real future is, where the real opportunities are, is in large-scale stationary storage batteries. So the vanadium redox flow batteries, and that's really, as Chrissy was saying, a market that we're very focused on. So, as I said, located in the middle of Western Australia, so a great spot to be. Just, I guess, some real key points. You know, it is all about the geology, and one of the earlier speakers yesterday talked about, you know, we've got the rocks. So it is about the geology, having the right geology, the right metallurgy to enable a very, I guess, reasonably straightforward process and at the right cost point. We are looking at doing conventional integrated processing on site. So we take it from those rocks all the way through to our final vanadium pentoxide product, so our high purity product that then will be able to go into that battery market. And I guess one of the real key things we achieved earlier this year is we've now got some financial support from the Danish Export Credit Agency. So EKF are supporting us to the value of around 150 million Aussie dollars for the development of the project. Corporate overview, we listed in December 2016, so we've been around for a little while. We had $12 million cash at the bank at the end of December last year, but still only 210 million shares on issue, so quite a nice tight structure. The other key takeaway from this slide is our major shareholder, Resource Capital Funds. So Resource Capital Funds came on in a capital raise we did in September 21. Raised $20 million, which was our last capital raise. They're sitting on our register with a touch over 17% of the shares in the company. So fantastic supporter. They did a lot of work to understand the vanadium market, did a lot of work to understand where the entry point was, and they chose us back in September 21 for that investment. Experienced board and management, that's I guess the standard quote, but I guess one of the real key things for us is our operations or our project readiness team. So again, Eddie Rigg talked about it this morning, is it rocks or people? And I tend to agree with him, different stages of projects, it is rocks or people or both. We're in that study and implementation phase. So we've got a guy called David English on our team, so our Chief Operating Officer. David was actually the guy who built one of the mines that Eddie was talking about, DeGrussa, for Samphire. So very, very experienced project developer in the West Australian market. And also really key for us, he spent 2 years at the only previous operating vanadium project in Western Australia at Windermurra. So he's got both the project development as well as the operating background. So really strong part of our team, and he's building a really, really good execution team around him. Sustainability and our ESG, very, very important for everything we do, has been from the very beginning. Clearly the focus from an investment point of view has moved more and more into this space, and again, I guess, you know, getting a Danish Export Credit Agency support really does show that we've moved a long way in developing up our ESG. We're working with WSP Golder on really being in a position ready to go on that construction and really supporting that ESG profile. So really good engagement with our local community, our local Indigenous community, and a very strong focus on our governance. One of the other things we've really focused on in the last little while is building a really strong, I guess, partnerships around us. And again, one of the things that Eddie commented on when you're in this phase, in this pre-development into moving into development phase, really, really important to have those strong partnerships. So we've got an MOU with Tata Steel that we entered into last October, which is really focused around the steel market. We've also got a really strong relationship with a Japanese vanadium electrolyte producer, LE Systems. So really good access into those markets. And on Monday of this week, we announced a MOU with an Indian vanadium redox flow battery company, Director, which I'll touch on a bit further, but really strong partnerships that we're developing with end users in our market. So really, really important. And on the other side of that slide, we talk about EKF, which I've mentioned with that funding support. That's linked to FL Schmidt. FL Schmidt are a Danish mining equipment provider. They are the leaders in vanadium processing technology. So we've been working with them since 2018. So really important relationship there. And that, as I say, links back to then EKF supporting the funding and development of the project. So a tier 1 project in a tier 1 location, I won't go into too much detail around that, but a couple of the key points for us. Shallow weathering, which is really, really important when it comes to our processing, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. Conventional integrated processing. So this is the processing that is actually happening as we speak in other parts of the world. So we're going to be adopting what's already tried and true and known in the world of vanadium. And high purity vanadium product, as I mentioned, so that'll be 99.5% ideal for the battery market, but also for the first 9 years we'll be producing an ilmenite byproduct, so a titanium dioxide byproduct, which really from a funding point of view helps to de-risk the project, having that dual revenue stream through the process. And the bottom bullet point there, the numbers we've been working on, we're close to about 200 million Australian in EBITDA every year for 25 years. So very, very strong financial metrics around our project. This is really important, and I guess it sets us apart from a lot of our peers in the developing vanadium space. This ability to have fresh ore close to surface. Fresh ore is really, really important in the processing. It means that we don't have to do a really fine grind out our material. We get a really high recovery, so we don't have to be overly capital intensive at the front end. Our actual yield into a product is really important and really high compared to a lot of our peers in the industry. So really sets us up well, and again goes back to that point of being able to then just use conventional processing, which is out there and operating. So long section through our main Gabonintha deposit. The red line is the base of oxidation, so we can see particularly on the north end there it's a very, very thin veneer before we get into the really high yielding material. The section on the right hand side is our Yarrabubba deposit, so it's a cross section through that, showing that variable, I guess, the oxidation profile. But in the pink unit there, that's our high grade unit. That's the economic driver of the deposit. Very, very shallow oxidation in that area as well. So really important to differentiate us. Touch on this quickly. I guess we've heard this through a number of speakers over the course of the last 2 days about the geopolitical situation we're in. Vanadium is a really interesting one in that 61% of supply has historically come from China, and then 16% come from Russia. So you put that together and you see a huge amount of supply that's coming out of those two jurisdictions, which clearly when we're looking at security of supply chain, end users are looking for diversity. So we sit there in Australia. Australia hosts around 18% of economic resources of vanadium in the world, and currently have no production, and so we're going to fix that. We'll be the first new large-scale vanadium project to come online. The obligatory cost curve, so this is numbers from last year. The blue star there, hopefully you can all see that, that's where we expect to be. So we're right down the bottom end of the cost curve, so ideally placed. Again, a long life asset, 25-year life as it stands today. You want to have that low cost profile so you can go through all the cycles over that period of time. The other key takeaway from there is that on the right-hand side, some of those higher cost producers are actually at costs above what the current vanadium price is. So you can see that from that, to enable increased production, we're going to have to be looking at a higher price, and that incentive pricing comes into the equation. So primary uses of vanadium, I touched on it earlier. Primary use currently is into steel, into construction steel, majority of. There's also a really strong use into high purity vanadium going into specialty alloys for the aeronautical industry. And right now that's a big driver of the market, because I guess the rebound in the aeronautical industry has happened much quicker than what everyone expected coming out of COVID. So at the moment that's putting a bit of pressure on the vanadium price. But the couple of pie charts there are really illustrative of why we're targeting the battery market. So this comes from CRU, who've done some work for us supporting our studies that we're in the middle of, saying basically from 2021, when 90% of vanadium went into steel, by 2040 they're expecting 75% of vanadium to go into batteries. So massive growth in the overall market, but also massive growth in that application. We're looking at, by the beginning of next decade, around 45,000 tonnes per annum shortfall in supply. And putting that into context, we're about a 12,500 tonne per annum producer. So there's a big opportunity for a number of us to get up and running by the end of this decade and really feed into that demand equation. Bit of context around what's happening in the battery space. So one of the big things that's really emerging, and we in the industry we've understood for a while, is that China's really driving some really large-scale batteries. So long-duration storage, really big batteries. But the numbers only really came to light in the last month or so of what they're actually putting into the volumes that are going into these. So we see in 2022 there's something like 6 or 7% of supply, of global supply, went into batteries in China in that year, and they're forecasting that to increase to 15,000 tonnes in the current year, which is getting up there, sort of 8 or 9% of total supply. And again, we'll be producing 12,500 tonnes per annum. So putting that into context, it's we're a significant producer, but in the context of that demand side, we're quite modest. The US Inflation Reduction Act, and a lot of people have been talking about this, again, driving a big demand into this space, and a lot of the offshore battery developers are moving into the US, including Sumitomo Electric, to really support that growth, and there's going to be a big number of applications into that space. Chris, you raised this right at the beginning. We're looking at the downstream. We're looking at adding value to our vanadium in Australia and then beyond, and we're working with LE System, which is a well-established Japanese vanadium electrolyte producer. They've got an operating facility up in Fukushima, which we visited last year. We've been working with them for the last couple of years, and earlier this year they took our product all the way from raw ore through to high purity vanadium electrolyte. So really ticking the boxes and confirming with end users that we are in the right space as far as producing that electrolyte. So we're working with them to develop our downstream in Australia and beyond. And then, as I mentioned, we've got a key partnership announced at the beginning of this year with a group called Director. So Director's an Indian group that is developing these vanadium redox flow batteries that are, again, on an exponential growth curve. So I think a couple of years ago they were talking about single-digit batteries being deployed. This year they've already got 100 VRFBs on their order books. So massive growth. They're recognising that they need to be partnering up with primary producers like ourselves to make sure they've got product to feed into their growing demand. They're also active in Europe, Saudi Arabia, North America. They've got established an office in WA, so they're really pushing out into the international market. They're actually putting a battery into Europe, which will be around supporting a EV recharging station. So solar generated power going into one of these batteries and then driving through to EVs. So, where are we at? So we actually completed a feasibility study on the project back in 2019. We've done some work on refreshing that and came up with a new reserve in August of last year. We're now in what we're calling the implementation phase of the project. So moving through, we've engaged with our key partners from a project level to work alongside David. We're working with our traditional owners to make sure that they're really included in what we're doing for this long-term project. And that ties into the permitting. And again, a big common theme for the last couple of days is progressing those permitting sides of things, and that's a big key focus for us. And it is all about being in a position so we can really move this implementation phase through. So I think, we believe very strongly we're a compelling investment. We believe very strongly we're going to be the next primary vanadium mine coming online, and we'd like to see some significant progress being made in that space over the next 6 months or so. We've got a reserve upgrade coming in the next little while, and that'll flow through to an updating of our financial model, which will put us in a bankable position to supporting the funding requirements. But we are industry-leading Tier 1 project, quality management and team around that to bring that through to fruition. We are a critical mineral supported around the globe. Australia, US, Europe is identified as a critical mineral in the space. We've got a great team to deliver on that, and with partners like RCF and partners like EKF, we are actually really well placed to bring the project through. So thank you very much.